This lecture tonight is all about self-driving vehicles. I'm Ian Buxton. I'm chairman of the local branch of the IET. I'd like to introduce our speakers tonight. We have Kirat Bedia and Paul Flowers here. Kirat, having learnt his trade in BT, helping to build switch management systems, established a company called Electronics, Computers and Systems. He tells me that was the name of the course he was on at university. And what that company did was to build bespoke applications that enabled organisations to run their mission-critical processes. Over more than 30 years, ECS has moved from back office to working on the control centre systems and safety platforms that enable self-driving shuttles to operate. After retiring from BT life, Paul established his own consultancy, Pi Business Services, and he's been helping innovative companies in multiple sectors to successfully secure more than £20 million of UK and European grant funding, working in fields such as air traffic control, drones, service robotics, medicine, quantum security, and autonomous vehicles. So tonight he's going to bring his insight and experience to the autonomous vehicles space. And so I think you're going to start, Paul.
I will.
So I'll leave it to you to carry on. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ian. And yeah, great to see you in the room and great to say hello to everybody online. We've already done introductions, but we thought today we'd sort of, self-driving vehicles have been talked about for quite a long time. So the question is, are we nearly there yet? There's been a lot of work done. We've got people in the audience who did some of the early work that we're going to sort of talk about today and how we've built on that. And we'll run you through what we know. Going to cover a little bit about the UK landscape. So we'll talk about the market, the technology, where the future's headed from a UK perspective. Is it real? We'll talk a little bit about we believe it's real. We'll share some of the things that are happening. We'll get into with Kirat how it works. I'll talk a bit about, well, actually, how well does it work? And then we'll talk about what next, take Q&A at the end. So if we go back, there's about 10 years of UK government investment to try and get self-driving vehicles or autonomous vehicles working on the road. I know some of these diagrams are blurry, but I'll just sort of explain them and talk to them in terms of the content. So there's been a lot of different government initiatives. If we go at the top here, there was a series of test beds established around the UK, not dissimilar to some of the 5G test beds, but these are obviously on-road facilities, testing facilities, test tracks, simulation facilities, etc. Since then, we've had a whole load of different competitions. We've had supply chain competitions, we've had deployment competitions, we're now moving into a next round of competitions. And as you can see from the dots on the map, there's projects that have sort of happened all around the country to try and drive the sector forward. Busy slide, sorry about that. But I mean, basically what this slide is saying is the government is still committed to investing in this technology. The UK government, they want the UK to springboard ahead of the rest of the world, and they want the UK to become a showcase for some of these technologies. We've got certain strengths. We've got a really strong automotive sector in the UK around the West Midlands. We've got data and AI expertise. All of that plays into self-driving vehicles. And it was all reaffirmed really through the industrial strategy and the sector plans that came out with the announcement that there'd be 150 million of extra funding over the next 3-4 years. So that funding is really focused on taking it off, if you like, the lab bench and really running autonomous vehicles on the roads in real places ahead of actually commercial services starting. And really the sort of we've got a bit of a hard end date. So, when I was in BT, we talked about the Olympics when that came to the UK, and that was a deadline that couldn't change. We all had to, everybody in BT had to make sure we were ready. Well, the deadline for autonomous vehicles is We've got the ITS World Congress up at the NEC in 2027. That is going to bring the great and the good from all over the world to look at what the UK is doing with respect to self-driving vehicles, and the UK government really want that to be a knock-'em-dead showcase. So that's why they're putting the money in now, and they're going through this series of competitions. I'll talk about some of this terminology in a little bit, but it's all about let's jump the world, let's bring the investment here, and let's actually get some of the benefits of the technology, having invested in it for over a decade. So the technology. We now talk about no user in charge. So up to now, we've been running trials with an onboard safety operator. So they might not be driving, but they're there to sort of override the system if they need to. Again, through 2026, 2027, the regulation will come in. We'll be able to have these vehicles running on the UK roads with nobody on board apart from the passenger. We will have a set of vehicles that are provided by suppliers, but in the language, they will be the authorised self-driving entities in classic, terminology. And then we'll have this concept really of there will be someone who operates the no user in charge service. So although there won't be anybody on the vehicle, there will be oversight of that service, and someone will be able to take control in a remote control centre. So there will still be human intervention at times, and that is going to be the NUCO, the no user in charge operator. And then actually you'll buy your ticket from an operator like a First Bus or a Lime or whoever those operators are, but behind that there'll be someone who worries about the technology. So just in terms of market landscape, these projections are a bit old now, but they're still the ones the government refer to. So this is by 2035, 650 billion global market, 42 billion UK market, potentially 50,000 jobs in this sector by 2035. There's a whole load of technology, as Kira will talk about, that goes around the vehicles. We think that's going to be, or the Connected Places Catapult are looking at that being a 100 billion market globally by 2035, and a 6.4 billion. You can sort of read the numbers, but yeah, lots of potential jobs, money coming out of these sort of services. What this chart shows down here is how strong the UK supply chain is. So we've got some good automotive manufacturing. We haven't got many manufacturers of autonomous vehicles in the UK. So, that's where the government wants to bring the investment. But in terms of other parts of the service, insurers, for example, we've got a good insurance market in the UK, but we need obviously to think about insuring a vehicle that's going to run itself on the streets with nobody on board to control it. It's quite a different model to the UK insurance market's used to. So again, we've got some baseline. We've got, as I said, we've got data background, we've got AI skills and specialism. All of that can sort of play in and sort of shoot us up on the journey, and that's what the government's hoping, obviously, with the extra 150 million. Again, I appreciate this is all a bit blurry. Sorry about that. It's probably me not doing my slides very well. But this is the question I'm trying to answer here: is it real? Is it really real, or is it just all in safe places, only working in closed off environments? Well, the answer to that is no, it is working actually out on public streets. So we ran a project called Street Cav in Milton Keynes. We did a lot of our testing at one of the test beds that was set up. That was actually at Cranfield University. So they've got an off-road track. So we did we brought the shuttles over. They're manufactured at the moment in China. The company who produce them are a New Zealand company. So we brought them over, got them all set up to run in the UK environment, did all that testing on the test track. And ever since then, we've been running, that is actually at BT. That is when Alison Kirkby, the new CEO of BT, came to Adastral Park for the first time. That was her first trip, and she got on the shuttle and experienced it sort of running around Adastral Park. And since then, we've been running it on the streets of Milton Keynes, also at the NEC. And prior to that, these shuttles, the same shuttles, have run all around the world. So we've got deployments that actually run in South Korea, New Zealand, Australia, across Europe, and now in the port of New York, New Jersey, and we're just deploying into California as well. So all of these places are seeing these shuttles running. We did a sort of over 3 days, if anybody went to the 50-year sort of celebration. At Adastral Park, we ran the shuttles there. We did just a half-mile route that connected the hub to like the Digitech Centre and the Smart House, and we ran it there. In Milton Keynes, we're on a 6-kilometre route. We go from the rail station. Well, you can see the route. You may not know Milton Keynes, but we go to the shopping centre. We go down to the theatre district, and we come all the way back on that loop. That takes about 25 minutes to run that circuit, and we go across traffic lights, roundabouts, avoid scooters, avoid people, you name it, it's on the route. We obviously do turn-ins. We turn right into where the buses go in, right outside the rail station. We do all of that automatically, and we've done like thousands of kilometres in lots of different scenarios on that route and others. So our view is it is real. Clearly, the technology is maturing all the time, but the good news is the UK regulation's kind of keeping up with it, and that's one thing that doesn't always happen. You know, the regulation sometimes has to catch up the technology. At least in this case, as we're ready to take the technology out with nobody on board, the regulations are coming, and the government's committed to actually enabling that to happen. So I'll hand over to Kieran then to talk about the technology.
Thank you, Paul. Obviously, with the autonomous vehicle, I mean, before I go into this picture, just to say that really, I think most of us would have actually been on an autonomous vehicle. If you've ever flown from Stansted, you'd have got in a train which is actually runs autonomously. Or if you've been to London and you've used the Docklands Light Railway, again, that's an autonomous vehicle. The thing about those two vehicles is they run on specific fixed lines, and really the CAV, or the connected autonomous vehicle, is very similar. It runs on fixed tram lines, but these are invisible tram lines. This is where the vehicle, we map out the route for the vehicle, and the vehicle follows that route precisely and just carries on along that route, and hence why it's used for like public transport, because you can then have a designated route where passengers can board the vehicle and exit the vehicle. So the thing about this vehicle, and I'll cover the vehicle first, is, as Paul mentioned, it's the Omea vehicle, which is for the HQ is in New Zealand. It has loads of technology on board to protect the vehicle itself. So whilst the vehicle is traveling, it's aware of its surroundings, it's looking after itself, making sure that it doesn't run into people, it can stop safely and things like that. So it's got lots of technology built into it, and some of those things that it does. So I've covered the route that it does, but it has, in terms of sensors, it's got a number of highlighted spots on there. So it's got cameras both looking outside the vehicle itself. It uses LiDAR and things like that to detect what's out there. It has things inside, so to allow the vehicle to run. So in some sense, you could actually just run this vehicle on its own, really, without any intervention, because the vehicle knows the route it needs to traverse, and can actually operate itself. They're doing things like overtaking procedures, so that when it comes across obstacles, there's no operator intervention. It can go and pass the vehicle. So it's all sort of going forwards. The key thing about this is, like when you see the DLR train, like when you see, if you are at Stansted and you're going off to your terminal, there is no steering wheel, or there's no one to actually guide the vehicle. If you go inside that vehicle, it's just a shell, and there's a number of seats, and you sit in there, and that's it. So that's how you travel. Obviously, it's 100% electric, so that's good for the environment. But there's other things on that slide just to indicate that really, as part of this vehicle, Paul spoke about the safety user. So there is regulation change coming in to allow the removal of the safety driver. But before we can get to that stage, before we can do anything like that, so the vehicle itself is geared up for autonomous travel, which it handles quite well. But for public use, you want a bit more than that, just to make sure that the vehicle is safe. So then what we do for that is, if we go to the next slide, right? For the next slide, what this slide is talking about is some of the things that the vehicle has to understand and look at. So for instance, the first diagram here, it needs to know share the highway with lots of other road users. So what you had things like the DLR, they don't have to worry about suddenly people might jump on the track, but they don't have to worry about trees encroaching them if they're going through tunnels and stuff like that. They can just operate at speed and it doesn't matter. Whereas when this autonomous vehicle is running, it's running on the public road. And in order to run on the public road, you have to then cater for all the things that are around the public road. So you get other road users, you get you get other street side furniture, you get lots of other things that get in your way. And so what the vehicle, the task for the vehicle is a lot harder on a public road than it would be if it was just a fixed tram line with nothing else beside it, because then it could run at speed. So the symbols at the bottom, what they're trying to show is things like it has to share the public highway. It has to think about look at collisions. It has to look at the keep a safety zone. It travels at certain speeds. So the vehicle at the moment, I believe, it travels around about 20 kilometers per hour, which is about 12 miles per hour. I think, but they can increase the speed, but then again, you have to think about all the safety measures and everything, so people feel comfortable. But it's still fast enough that when you sit in there, it is going quite quickly. And the other thing is, because it can operate on things like bus lanes, when you are in the vehicle, you're actually moving past a lot of stationary cars, so that seems a lot faster anyway, right? The other diagrams that are showing is things like it navigates around roundabouts. It does things like interacts with traffic lights, which I'll cover a bit later on, and so on and so forth. And towards the end, it's talking about things like eventually the vehicle will part of what the tickets are is multimodal journeys. So things like where the vehicle, so you got to, once it becomes a fully integrated transport system, then you go where you can buy a ticket to take you, let you use a cab, use a bus, use a train to plan your whole journey. The idea being is that really for places like Milton Keynes, they want to get the drivers out of the car and using simple transport like this, so that it makes everything connected and let them operate quickly. So that's all the things it has to do. But in order to achieve that, the vehicle itself has limited sensors. Although it's got sensors that can operate, it needs some other things to help it along the way. So, and that really, it comes from a technology stack that we've got in the corner there. So we call that autonomy as a service. So basically, it's a technology stack to help feed additional information to the vehicle to help it to work. Okay. So which I'll cover in a bit more detail now. So sorry guys, the slide is very busy, but it's trying to convey a lot of information about all the challenges that the vehicle faces. Yeah. But so for this one, so as we a lot of no, actually,
I'll cover this if you like.
yes, now you've skipped one.
Oh, right.
You skipped, no, sorry, yeah, you are, sorry. Yeah, Paul, go on, carry.
All right.
Let's
So
connectivity.
we'll talk about the connectivity, which is sort of at the base of the technology stack. So they are connected and autonomous vehicles. It's really important, obviously, that they stay connected. A lot of the information that they need, a lot of the control signals from the control centre, if a remote operator had to take over and actually steer. I thought I'd describe these as the world's most expensive remote control car. You've got someone in a control centre with a joystick who can literally drive the vehicle on the road if they need to. Usually the vehicle just runs, but obviously if you're running an environment like that, you need to be able to see what the vehicle can see. You need to be able to hear what the vehicle can see. You need to be able to take control and know that the vehicle will do what you instruct it to do from the control centre. There's lots of data flying about all the time anyway. So you can only do that with really high quality, really reliable network coverage. So up to now, we've had to deploy our own effectively private 5G standalone networks along the route, not scalable if you want to make this a really commercial service. So what I'm just showing here is as part of that street cab project, we did some work with a company called Cable Free. They developed quite a neat way to get 5G all along the route. So they effectively built a pod that you could hang off of an existing lamppost really easily and have connectivity all the way along the route, line of sight, run over a 5G standalone core as a private 5G network. And that's what we've used in the past. So, you know, we had to sort of install our own private 5G networks wherever we wanted to run these things. Not great if you want to take that across the country. The great news is we're working really closely with BT. BT are rolling out now their 5G standalone networks. And we now use the 5G standalone networks where we can, and we'll do handover if we have to switch from a private 5G to that commercial offering. And I think ultimately, you know, we are doing a lot more with BT so that they can actually give us a network slice, give us full guarantee of bandwidth, availability, etc., etc. You get all the security that comes with that because it's a BT network that you can trust. And that'll be the future, so that as we take these vehicles all around the country, not just us, but other operators as well, they'll at least just be able to pick up a BT SIM that's a CAV optimized SIM that's got all the right slice, gives you all the right levels of speed and all the rest of it that you need, quality of service, guaranteed even if there's a crowd, etc. So, but we put these pods together with Cable Free. You know, they can go up, they can come down really quickly. Obviously you need the backhaul still, you still need power, but usually a lamppost got the power. If you've got a lamppost with power, you've usually got a way to route the backhaul. We're now doing more to actually connect these up with LEO satellite, so we can put these pods into places where you haven't necessarily got the fibre backhaul. You know, we're doing that project with the European Space Agency. To actually sort of build that capability out. The other things that we'll do is we'll put things like GNSS receivers and RTK, which are GNSS is how the shuttle knows its location, so it's like the GPS system, and then you get a correction through real-time kinematic servers, and we'll build actually an RTK node into the pod as well. So I'll have everything inside that pod that the CAV needs. And ultimately, so Kieran's going to talk about some of the systems we use. You know, we will look at how we can take some of those systems to the edge. So as we get sort of proper MEC-enabled networks, and we have an edge compute network as part of the cell, we'll be able to do some of the processing at the edge, as well as just offer the network connectivity. So there's quite an exciting sort of roadmap here in terms of how we can use 5G and then 6G, etc. But no, Cable Free built this, they patented it. You know, they're selling it in other places. It's not just for cabs. If you need a quick way to get 5G up and running and you've got a few lampposts that you can hang it off, brilliant, you can have your 5G network relatively easily. But that obviously is it's important baseline capability upon which everything else is built. And I think now I'll hand back to Kieran.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. No, right. So having got connectivity, I think really the best way to start this slide is to speak to all the car drivers amongst you, and I'm sure a lot of people drive. And if you ever get stopped by the police and they say, "Oh, you were driving without due care and attention," that will have a specific meaning to most drivers, and that basically means that you're being in charge of a vehicle, you're driving somewhere, and you're not paying attention to the road or other road users. And the reason I say that that's important because when you've got a cab where there's no driver in there, it still needs to be aware of what's around it. And although itself, the cab itself is safe and it can protect itself and it can make sure it doesn't, bump into things like that. What we are doing is, in order to run the service properly, is to give it a situational awareness. And that is really to give it information so that it can see other things to help it make a better informed decision. Okay. And that process, that's called V2X, vehicle to everything. So basically, the CAV connects to the V2X system. It reports its location. It says where I am, etc. And the V2X system gathers information from lots of other systems and things like that, and it can feed it back to the CAV and let it know about some of the information it needs so that it can operate safely. So, for instance, in here, down here, we've got like traffic light information it might want to know, which I'll cover a bit later on. The cyclist is representing a vulnerable road user, so on. And the other things that the V2X is capable of doing is because it's got communication to the CAV itself. Generally, it's reading information from the CAV and supplying information to it using standards like the CAV reports using CAV messages, and then we send back denim messages about what sort of instructions to give to the vehicle. So that to do all of that, what happens is that the CAV is connected to the V2X system, but the V2X system in general is only giving it information to the CAV so it can make a better decision. The V2X never instructs the CAV. It never tells it, oh, you must turn right or accelerate or decelerate. The reason for that is that the CAV itself is capable of making that decision, and it makes that decision. So if the V2X system gets it wrong and the CAV accelerates and bumps into someone, then you have lots of insurance stuff and things like that saying which system was in charge when the vehicle had an accident, etc. So what the V2X does, it's the additional information, it's the situational awareness, it gives it information about its surroundings for the CAV to then make an informed decision, and we work along that. So we do that. But there is one instance where we do instruct the CAV, and that's in a stop signal. So I'll come on to the control center a bit later on, but there are instances when you might wish to instruct the CAV to stop, and that is what we call a control stop. So this is a stop where from the V2X system, a signal is sent to the CAV asking to come to a stop because an operator has detected something and they would like the CAV to stop. And so that is sent to the CAV. There is on the CAV itself, like in lots of other public transport vehicles, there is also a physical stop button, and that's an emergency stop. So if anyone presses that immediately causes the CAV to stop, but that is a physical stop that's on the CAV. What we apply is a control stop based on an input from a control person, to say we would like the CAV to stop. But just to highlight on this point, the V2X is standard based. We've kept it so that it can be used not only for the CAVs, the OMIO CAVs, it can be used by any other CAVs that might come onto the market. We've kept it so that it can be as generic as possible. Paul mentioned things like working close to the 5G core, because eventually what you should find is as the number of calves increases, we want to make sure that they get connectivity straight away, and then we can hand over between cells and stuff like that. So those are the sort of things that we want to take further and operate. But at the moment, because of the number of calves, we've got it down. It's quite a contained system at the moment. It's not part of the 5G core, sits outside it, but it works that way. But so that's the software that we've been working on to give it that intelligence, so that the calf itself can make an informed decision and operate in a way that is safe for all the other road users. Okay, right. So a really good example of that is traffic lights. So one of the things with the cab, it can do lots of things. It can traverse roundabouts, it can overtake cars and stuff like that. But when it gets to a traffic light, there are systems out there that you can take a picture of the traffic light, work out the state of it, and then decide whether you want to go or not, etc. But for this system, what was decided, we want to make it better than that. So we actually have access to the public, for Milton Keynes, we have access to, or we will be granted to an access to their infrastructure to allow us to connect to their traffic light system, their traffic light system management system. So we can then work out the state of those lights. And what we can do is we really need to know only two states. Is it red? You can't go? Yeah, or is it green? The calf can go. So we don't deal with amber. So because amber is normally an indication whether you're going from red to green or from green to red. Okay, so if the calf is allowed to proceed and cross the junction, it's classified as green. If the calf is not allowed to proceed, go through the junction, it's classified as red. And what we do is we provide that information, we provide a countdown to the calf where, as it's approaching a light, to say whether that light, if it's green, how long it's going to remain green for. So the calf can then, together with the calf, it can calculate whether it's got enough time to carry on progressing and cross the junction safely to reach the other side, right, without causing any issues. Okay, so that. But if it's going to turn, if there is not enough time, the calf can start slowing down and stopping. And once the light turns back to green, we can instruct the calf it's good to go. So traffic light integration is very key to a smooth operation of the service, because at the moment in the field, the only one of the places where the operator has to intervene is for the traffic light. And for normal drivers, Joe Public, people get used to, they know roughly, if they travel a route regularly, they know how long the traffic light is going to be green for, red for, whatever, and they get ready, or they prepare themselves when it goes from green to orange, etc. But the cab actually will know exactly when that light's going to change, so it can make a decision straight away. So actually has a slight advantage of the normal driver, because it will know that it's going to turn green within the next second, and it can start. It won't cross the line before it turns green, but it can start preparing itself and do that. So traffic light integration is one of the things that the V2X helps the cab with to sort of navigate. Yeah, that's one bit.
National Cyber Security Centre.
Oh, National Cyber Security. Okay, well, because this is part of the national. Okay, so the traffic lights form part of the national infrastructure, transport infrastructure, and we all know about all the potential risks to the national infrastructure from various parties and stuff like that. So before we were allowed connectivity to the effectively the national infrastructure, we had a sit-down session with the National Cyber Security Centre, and we had to describe the way we were doing things and what we were going to do and how we're going to do, and they would then look at that and expose what weaknesses we had in our system, so we could then ensure that we'd close them off, and if there any, etc. So basically that allows to ensure that we don't want to create a hole through which other attackers can get through to then affect the national infrastructure. So that's one of the things we have to do. But yeah, so that's what that's there for, just for your information. Yeah. Okay. So the first stage was good. The traffic light, that's one bit. But now having access to the traffic light data, one of the other exciting things that we need to do is to give the CAV priority. That's what Milton Keynes wanted to do, was to allow the CAV to really sail through any potential points where you might need to stop. So like traffic lights, if they can be given priorities via the traffic light system, then that's great. So buses do that already. Buses have a system in them, and when they approach traffic lights, they inform, they can send a signal which allows that traffic light to be turned green. So you might have seen places where buses suddenly appears and suddenly they've got right to go straight away. So buses already do that. The thing with the bus systems are they just simply they've got a set route, and when they follow that, when that bus gets that, signals the traffic light, and the traffic light system allows the bus to go first. With the CAV, we're taking a slightly different approach. With the CAV, what Milton Keynes wanted was more of a rules-based approach, because what you don't want to do is every single CAV, and they want to operate something like 20, 30 CAVs. They don't want every single CAV that approaches a traffic light to say, hey guys, let me go through. And if you've got crossroads and another CAV coming the other side, it gets really complicated. So with the system that we're building, it's got a rule base behind it, so it allows prioritization at either certain times, either on certain routes or certain things. So the council can dictate, actually, on this at this time we would like the CAVs to definitely during peak hours to get priority. So which means that it will then make people use the CAV, connected autonomous vehicle, more than they're actually trying to use their own transport or walk or whatever. So that's one aspect of it. But giving prioritization, there's also another factor to that as well. Because if we've already got access to the Milton Keynes data set, and we can see the traffic lights and we can influence the changing of those traffic lights, one of the use cases they are considering is Milton Keynes. If you know this location, sits next to the M1 motorway, and when there's a problems on the M1 motorway, like most towns, if there's a by road, so Ipswich got the Orwell Bridge, whenever that's blocked, all the traffic is going to funnel through the town to go past it, right? So you've got the same thing in Milton Keynes happening. And what Milton Keynes would like to do is say, okay, once you've got that system working for the CAV, is it possible to extend that so that when you've got an abnormal situation, then you can regulate the traffic lights slightly, set them in a different way to allow that volume of traffic to get through quickly. Because if you use the normal settings, then obviously it's set for a certain amount of throughput, and so do that. So that's something, but that's the next step beyond. But first step we want to do is just make sure it gives priority to the CAV, and it can show that can operate and then do that. The CAV, the way it's built is because we already collected information about the traffic light. It will the only thing the CAV will know is that it's got a longer time to cross, or when it gets there, the red time it's not allowed to cross becomes shorter. So that, having now developed that bit of software, then this bit can just fit straight onto it, and the CAV is none the wiser that it's been prioritized. It just simply goes along and does that. Yeah, that's that one. Right. So we've talked about the CAV, which is the actual vehicle itself. We've spoken about some of the technology stacks that operate and give it information and do that. But like all these things, and Paul touched upon at the beginning, is you need some oversight. You need something to monitor it, something to look after it, etc. And that's where the control room comes in. So the two boxes highlighted there is one's the control room and the other one's the data exchange. So if I just cover the data exchange first, data exchange was a BT product. Some people might be aware of, and basically what it did was took a collection of feeds, put them together so that you could bring those feeds together, and then anyone who needed to use those feeds could use them and do things with it. Smart City have got BT sold them a version of the data exchange, so they've got their own version of data exchange. And what happens is the CAV and certain bits of information get recorded in the data exchange, and then we as users of the data exchange can extract that data and do things with it. So part of that data that we extract from it is to actually drive a number of control room dashboards, and we use the data on that. But that covers, which I'll cover in a minute. But the thing about the control room, just to highlight, the first thing is that it's made up of a myriad of systems, okay, that get control. So there'll be, as you probably know about most control rooms, there'll be a thing that looks after the network infrastructure. Is it relying, is running correctly, etc. Is it performing well? There might be a set of screens looking after the cameras that are monitoring the calves or looking out and stuff like that, and might be a remote operation desk which is used to control the calf should it require intervention. So there are already a number of systems that sit inside the control room. One of the things that we've also identified and we're doing is that there's to create a system that is an overarching system to look at a number of disparate feeds and bring them together and show them as one sort of view. So that really is more for the control room staff who will carry out the day-to-day management. So they can see things like the position of the calf, where it's operating the thing on the ground, lots of other information about traffic lights, about roundabouts, about variable message signs, things like that, and bring it together so they can operate the service easily. And they'll have things like the access to the stop button to stop the calf, to say, okay, because they've identified something they need to do. So what this slide is showing is the control room is made up of a number of systems, but there is an overarching system that we use for management, etc. And one of the capabilities of that is that we can play back some information. So what we can do is we record the information as a time series database, and then if an incident happens, you can say, okay, show me all your readings from this point and go forwards, and let's work through and see what happened. And those sort of things you need in place to answer things like, if there was an incident, then there'll be lots of people want to know what happened, why did it happen, where did it happen, etc. To give you that sort of view, you need to be able to go and rewind, carry on, and then look at it. And they're the sort of things that we're working on and developing and building, so to allow that sort of things to work, so that really we can make the service as safe as possible, prove that it's safe as possible, control it, and just make sure that it's safe enough to travel on. Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about how we make this all work, and then the question is, well, how well actually does it all work? So I've just put a few statistics up here. When we did the Adastral 50th anniversary, as I said, we ran it for 3 days. We just did half a mile route, little bit around Adastral Park. People could just walk on, walk off as they wanted to. And we always do passenger survey feedback. We use like a net promoter at the top level, and then we've got more detail obviously underneath that. As it happened, when we did it at Adastral Park, 80 was our score out of 100. That's not untypical. We've had hundreds of these surveys, and we get between 80 and 95 with a net promoter. We've never had a detractor. I mean, which is good, but is that because the detracting sort of cohort are just not filling the survey in? Don't know. But anyway, in general, you know, we get a small number of people who are sort of in the middle, but the majority of people, and people are enthusiastic about it as well. You know, so, and this is just a couple of the quotes that we got while we were at Adastral. So I think the person who was in the middle was saying, I'm not sure about the other drivers. I'm okay with the cab, but what about everybody else who's on the roads? How's it going to work? And because the cab has to follow the highway code, one of the things that, you know, will frustrate drivers is if it knows the traffic light's going to go to red, the cab will slow down. Human behaviour might be, if it sees amber, we might speed up to get across the junction. So there's things like that that ultimately, hopefully lead to a safer environment because it's all sort of working to the rules, if you like. But then, you know, other drivers do get a bit agitated when, you know, it actually stops for a red light rather than jumps across. So I think that comment is valid. You know, how are other drivers going to feel about it? But, you know, everybody else, you know, people often say, yeah, it was very boring, the journey, as in there was nothing that worried me. People will say things like, I think it's safer than me driving home tonight. You know, that is sort of feedback that we get. So yeah, really positive, sort of in terms of the passenger feedback. We go out to a lot of events as well. So as well as running in Milton Keynes and at the NEC, we've done things at Suffolk Showground here. We've done things at Ston and Barnes. So yeah, we get, and often people are queuing to get on. So you know, it definitely generates interest. In terms of, you know, how many runs have we had? Well, hundreds, probably more than 200 plus now. That's probably a bit out of date. We ran it for 3 days constantly as part of the Tech Week festival in Milton Keynes. We had 5 cabs over 3 days, running every 15 minutes with people coming on and off all the time. We're lucky, we get lots of VIPs, dignitaries, you know, cabinet ministers, MPs come and being interested. We've had people come over. I mean, this we really thought was amazing. We had people come from Japan, the ministry in Japan, to say, we heard that you were doing it for real and we wanted to see what that was like. So, you know, usually Japan's out there doing this stuff, but they actually came to Milton Keynes specifically to see the shuttles in action. You know, so yeah, lots of really good feedback. You know, we're probably over 1,000 kilometres now. We've had over 1,000 passengers. As I said, no detractors. The most important thing though is we've not had any incidents on the road at all in the whole of that time. So, you know, we have near misses, we learn from them, but we've never actually had an incident in all that time. And that's the evidence base that we're trying to build, because when we're going to an insurer and saying this vehicle's going to drive itself, it's going to be alongside buses, scooters, people, cycles, you name it, going to drive itself, and we want you to insure it, we need that evidence base to really be able to show that it is actually safer than a human driver, because otherwise the premiums are phenomenal, but they'd be impossibly phenomenal and we wouldn't be able to build it, and it wouldn't be viable. So yeah, so really quite good feedback. Again, I appreciate the charts are like really small, but I mean, these are more to show the trend. So when we first started on the route in Milton Keynes, obviously we record every time there's an intervention by the onboard operator. We've got people on board at the moment. We're not allowed not to have people on board at the moment under the regulation. So, you know, we classify, you know, as you would in any sort of incident management, you look at the root cause, you understand what the issue was, you put you know, something in to fix that issue. You know, in our case, it's about training the shuttle to interpret things differently at different parts of the route quite often. So the shuttle has a safety envelope that you can adapt dynamically and in software. One of the things about that is everywhere, as for instance, in central Milton Keynes, there's dual carriageway right in the city centre. So if you're at a roundabout, you've got a dual carriageway, there's a car beside you waiting to go in the roundabout. Initially, when we ran it in Milton Keynes, it felt that car was in its safety zone, so therefore it had to stop and it wouldn't go anywhere. You just are able, obviously, to tune that out. You can explain it to the shuttle. When you've got a car beside you at this point in the route, you're actually safe because that car's going across the roundabout like you are. Just simple things like that, you just tune out. Foliage causes problems for some of the 5G connectivity in the summer. It can also cause problems for the LiDAR that are on the shuttle. So as the foliage starts to creep in, and Milton Keynes is a very green city, as the foliage starts to creep in, all of a sudden it will think, I've got an object in my path. Again, you tune that out. And we've had low-flying pigeons that have sometimes caused it to stop, etc., etc. So there's all sorts of things that you can, over time, obviously, you train it to get better at the route. So this is where we started, and this is the point now. So, we're probably actually running more journeys now, which this slide doesn't really get across, than we were up here, but we're having far fewer interventions, and the type of interventions are much less. So when we were up here, sometimes the onboard drivers, they were hitting the emergency stop button and physically bringing the thing to a sharp halt. Some of that is them understanding that the shuttle was safe, and maybe they were thinking, I don't know what it's going to do here, right? But here, these are more effectively tasking the shuttle. So things like Kieran talked about at the traffic lights, saying you're safe to go, or, if you've got a pedestrian crossing, we might program it for safety to say you await an instruction that the crossing's safe. It will detect people. I've run at the shuttle and it's stopped when I've got towards it. We've done all of that sort of testing at Cranfield with cars cutting in. But, we might decide there are certain places on the route where we say, well, you await an instruction. And that's what these things are now. It's more like, can I have permission, please? And if you give me the permission, then I'll go. So it's that sort of intervention now, and obviously far less. And it gets better all the time. Actually, to do this, you can have this tuned in 72 hours if you want to. We've been running, for 3 years in Milton Keynes, but we haven't always been on the road every hour of every day in that time. We pick different days, different weather conditions, different different periods in the day, when it's busy, when it's quiet, to see how the shuttle performs. But actually, if you needed to, the guys have said you can take it to a new site, you could run it intensively over 3 days, so like a weekend, and then you could have the shuttle running and it'd all be tuned up. And of course, we're learning now about the things we can program, where the issues might be, and we can automatically sort of build that into the maps. So what next? So we've talked a lot about this autonomy as a service model. We're continuing to evolve all that capability. We will add over time more use cases to like the V2X. The V2X is designed that potentially you could link that into car systems as well. So, it isn't just for autonomous vehicles. So, once you've got access to traffic signal data, you can actually connect that into a car system. That's what they do in other places around the world. So we all know when the lights are going to change and what the sequence is. Maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing, but actually the V2X architecture has been designed to be open. The other thing that, we could do with the V2X is we could put it onto the scooters. So where there's rental scooters and rental cycles, so we're not just telling the shuttle that those rental scooters and rental cycles are coming towards the shuttle. We can tell the scooters and the cyclists that they've got a self-driving vehicle coming. We could send out message to cars. We're already talking to variable message signs. We're looking at, should we have a street side LiDAR or street side camera that sort of looks at the traffic that's coming towards a roundabout and tells the shuttle where the gaps are. outside of the shuttle's line of sight and outside of its vision. You know, there's lots of different things you can do. The council have talked about £1 million, get a green at every traffic light ticket, so we could do that. Not that we will, but you know, someone could pay to always have green, and we could do that through the VTEX. But there's all sorts of use cases that are serious use cases that we could do. So people who, you know, maybe hard of hearing, not sighted, you know, we could alert them that there is a self-driving vehicle in the vicinity. There's all sorts of different things like that. 999 vehicles we could connect into, so they could always get a green at the traffic light, etc. So I think there's a lot, and it's one of those things that the more you look at what are all the different use cases, all the different scenarios, there's plenty we can do on the V2X. We're constantly adding data feeds into the data exchange, and we're doing more and more sensor fusion, so that we bring the different feeds together, so we compare. One of the things about LiDAR is, you know, reflections, so it will reflect on maybe if a puddle, rain, certain bits of metal. So actually, if we fuse that with a stereo camera, which we've got on the shuttle now, we can actually get rid of the false positives that we sometimes get with the LiDAR. So all of those enhancements, we're moving all of those sort of forward all the time. We really see, we're not going to run these at 60 miles an hour on a dual carriageway or a motorway, these shuttles. They really are about the shorter journeys and helping people not get in a car and create congestion. So we're going to really push the first mile, last mile. We're talking now to bus operators have a bit of a problem with self-driving vehicles because it's just so completely alien, obviously, the concept of not having a driver. So there's been a few trials where bus operators have been involved, but then they've actually backed out because they're like, I can't get my head around the fact there's not going to be a driver. You know, the driver's a big cost and means that certain bus services just aren't viable commercially. And we see it around here. We're working with Suffolk. They're seeing a lot of the rural services being withdrawn because the operators just can't make them work because of the cost of the driver and sort of not the tickets, numbers are too low. So we are working with operators, not just bus drivers, but we're talking to the DLR, the people who operate the DLR, for example. You know, would they want to come in and be an operator in the future? And we need to work out, you know, where does their role stop? Where does our role stop and their role start? And how much of, there's a lot of software in here. Do they want to do all the software updates? Do they want to do all the route mapping? Or do they really want to do the ticketing and timetabling and take the fare? You know, so we've got to work all that out with operators, which we are doing now. You know,
Well, can we sort of start there?
Oh, sorry, I'll wind up. Yeah. So yeah, keep going, keep pushing. The shuttles are here in Suffolk. We're hoping to run shuttles around Industrial Park and into Beardmore Park and Brightwell Lakes as part of our future plans. And that is it.
Okay, thank you. Time for questions. Let's take one from the atrium to get us started, if you don't mind. Yeah, all right, Paul.
So you've described a very infrastructure-heavy approach, which, as I said before, it was part of the Milton Keynes project itself and developed the information exchange that you said you've been using. But do you think the Waymo type approach is that competitive to this? Are the things going to converge at some point in the future, do you think?
So I think they will converge, right? I think, you know, at the moment where we're running, we kind of feel we need this infrastructure around us. But I think ultimately, you know, as the shuttles become more and more autonomous and we build up the capability on the shuttle, you know, you can take away the need for some of that infrastructure. I just think at the moment, yes, the regulations are moving forward, but certainly local authorities, if they're going to do this as a public transport offering, they don't want to be taking any chances, you know. So yeah, we've got quite a high bar, I think, there at the moment. We don't want to take any chances either, because I think in the UK, you know, this is not mature. Not mature. You get one incident, and, you know, and that could write the sector off, you know, for a while, because people go, I'm not going to go near it. So sort of reputationally, you can't really take the chance. But yeah, I think over time, of course, you take some of that away, and you get more to the, let the vehicle do it. Won't service.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps. That's
George.
One, I'll make a plea to people on the webinar. Please raise your questions by the Q&A tab. I have some already. And I've got one from Joe Ryder, who asks, how do you tackle complex junctions like roundabouts?
Right. So I think Paul touched upon that at the beginning. So the CAV itself, so for the roundabouts around Milton Keynes, that's where the shuttle's been operating. They've already done some testing on that, and they can program the shuttle so that the actual settings on the shuttle allows it to traverse a roundabout safely. But some of the other options we looked at was things like having variable message signs on approach to the roundabout, where you've got these effectively slow moving vehicles operating to inform the road user that there is a slow moving vehicle on the roundabout. But the way we did that was we only activated those signs when there was a vehicle within that proximity and switched that sign off. So it wasn't on all the time. So when the sign was on, people became aware of it. So there's that. There's also other things that we looked at in the past, and we might explore further, is to say what are the sensors you need away from the roundabout to understand the flow of traffic coming into it, and then inform the shuttle accordingly. But the shuttle itself is more than capable of navigating itself around the roundabout, okay, even with other traffic on there. As Paul mentioned, in terms of the safety envelopes and everything, they just reduce them slightly to make sure that it can get slightly closer to a car, because in roundabouts we tend to follow a curve and stuff like that. So that can happen. So there are a number of ways we're working on, and they're just some of the sort of methods we've tried.
Okay. Did you want to add some?
Yeah, the thing I would add is, and it is interesting, because in Milton Keynes, the roundabouts are really fast. So, you know, even in the city centre, they're doing sort of 50, 60 miles an hour, even though they're 40 limit, they are really fast roundabouts. But actually, the shuttle behaves and handles those really well. So, and it will actually mimic what a human driver will do. You know, if it thinks it's got a gap, it will start to pull out. If it then thinks, no, I've not got enough time, it will stop, and it will sort of just retreat a little bit, and then it will go. You know, so actually the shuttle itself works really well, even on quite busy, quite fast roundabouts. But I think all the things that Kieran talked about, again, you know, they are the belt and braces. And I think it goes a bit to your question as well earlier, that we're putting all these things in because we'd rather have lots of checks than not enough. And as we feel we build the confidence, we can take those away. But the shuttle does handle roundabouts actually really well. But all those other things help.
Okay, thank you. Do we have another question from the atrium? Yeah. Yeah.
I was just wondering what the financial model was. You know, is it sort of free to use and the council has to pay for it, or is there some way you can charge passengers as they get on, or, you know, let them put cards on a reader?
Yeah, so either actually. In Milton Keynes, they're very keen that they make it free to use. You know, that's what they're looking at the moment. And that might be, you know, there might be shuttles that are sponsored by people. You know, they might have, you know, a brand all over them that sort of covers it, or they might be included. The other thing that I think Milton Keynes, and we certainly they do at the NEC, is if you pay for car park, and people who know the NEC, that's quite a long way to get actually to the NEC from the car park. So there's things like you pay for your car parking ticket, you take the price of that, and that effectively covers the fare. You know, the other things that you can do in new developments particularly is you can look at when there's a new housing development, which these shuttles would be ideal for, connecting to the bus service, etc. There's the Section 106 funding, and the housing developers have to provide transport. more and more the housing developers are finding a bus operator won't do it because they can't make the money because there's not enough people in the development to start with. So actually, you know, there's funding like that that can help get these things running in certain places, get people onto public transport rather than into the car. And then you've sort of converted the behaviour from the start, rather than everybody have to get in a car because there is no bus. And then you're never going to get people to take public transport. So there are quite a number of different models. We're also looking at a model where effectively a holding company leases the shuttles out to the operators. So the risk is sort of effectively with the holding company. Increasingly, I think councils will start to franchise services again. They've been given new powers. So up to now, buses have been quite deregulated. Anybody can set up a bus service, and there's not, as long as you hit all the safety rationale, you can apply. You can have a full flowers bus running on some route somewhere within 6 weeks, I think. Actually, and that's created lots of pop up like bus services that haven't really lasted once the subsidies are gone. What councils will start to do is they'll franchise, I think. So they'll say, we want a service that runs from here to here. They might specify they want it autonomous or they want it connected into a bus service through an autonomous vehicle. And I think that will change the commercial model as well. So there's quite a lot of different things you can do on the commercial side that I think will help with the uptake.
Great, Paul. Another one from the webinar.
I've got one, and it's partly from Kevin Foster, who raised one, and but I'm going to add something as well. Kevin's asking, can you really make these self-driving vehicles safe? And you mentioned insurance. What sort of evidence base would you need to generate? I.e., over what period? And how many hours would you need to convince these people that this is genuinely a risk that the insurer can take?
Yeah, they're both really good questions. So I think we can make them safe. I think, they, dare I say, are safe today, but, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. In terms of the insurance, that's a really good question because actually the insurance company don't know either. Right, so we are going to work. We've got, again, at the moment, we've got one insurer in the UK who will, and they're charging extortionate amounts of money because they are the only insurer in the UK. But we are now working with insurers who are more used to different models. So they do things like they'll insure delivery drivers, scooter operators, Amazon van owners, people who, different kinds of insurance, and they are really focused on this new opportunity where everything's autonomous, whether it's a drone, whether it's a robot, whether it's a vehicle. And actually they'll come in with us on a future project now and partner with us. And actually they'll do all the proper risk assessment and risk allocation. And we'll be running with, through a period of probably another 2 years, we'll be running all the time these shuttles and giving them all the access to that data. And ultimately that is because they want to come into the market and disrupt it. They see the opportunity. So, I think by the end of the time on that project, it is 2 years and probably before, they will have a position where they can allocate the risk and say, okay, we understand what good looks like. We understand what the parameters are. We understand what the risk is. And then we will get cheaper insurance, which again helps with the commercial. Because the risk at the moment is we take the driver out, but effectively we pay for more than we pay for a driver to have the insurance at the moment, and that's the problem. And you can't make it commercially viable, and we need more time to prove it. I hope that helps in terms of that.
Okay, another one from the atrium, Chris.
When I'm riding my bicycle, I'm particularly going across roundabouts, I like to make eye contact with the driver to get reassurance that he's aware of my presence and going to give way to me. Is there some equivalent non-drivers driving to give me acknowledgement that he knows I'm there?
That's a really neat idea, actually. And at the moment, so there is things we can do, right? So we do things with the shuttle's got little variable message signs on. I think you know, we could say, I've seen you, or we could give you a wink or something, you know. So, yeah, I think it's something like that. We've thought about how do you make the passengers inside the shuttle feel safe, right? Not necessarily around. So I take that. I think that's a really great.
But steer him hard enough.
Yeah, you know, I think that's really great. Have a little robot at the front that pretends it's driving, says I've seen it. But yeah, like it.
Okay, let's just take one if there is one online, George.
From Richard Farrell, is the typical safety reaction of the vehicle only to stop slow, or will the CAV ever decide to swerve, accelerate to avoid an unexpected intrusion?
So the default manoeuvre is to stop at the moment. I think over time, you know, and we are, one of the reasons we're obviously taking all the data in is we need to have that data on file, but it is also to look at, well, okay, how could we tell the shuttle to do something different in certain situations? You know, the machine learning, more artificial intelligence, train it to be able to cope. But right now, we are on the side of caution. If there's and most operators do this, their minimum risk manoeuvre, as they call it, is to stop. Because, all right, the traffic behind's got to stop and not run into you, but that is probably the safest thing for the vehicle to do right now. So yes, I think in the future. At the moment, we do a manual overtake. So that's an operator will instruct the shuttle at the moment to do the overtake function, but it has got autonomous overtake, and we're testing that at Cranfield. It's been tested elsewhere in the world. So I think increasingly the shuttle will get smarter and probably be more like the human driver. But at the moment, it's like err on the side of caution.
All right, thank you. Another one from the Andrew. Go on.
Yeah, question about culpability. If the shuttle was to do something that infringed some rule thing, got a ticket, who's culpable for that?
So the vehicle provider is the party who's liable, right? So because the driving system, and that's one of the reasons that the V2X doesn't tell the shuttle what to do. The V2X gives it extra information, and that's been a really interesting. Who's liable? Is it the council? Is it, you know, the safety operator? Is it? But actually, it's the manufacturer of the vehicle is liable.
Do they get points on licenses as well?
Well, that's a good point. So I mean, it is interesting because we're working with the DVSA and the VCA, right? And they're like, how are we going to MO? Just to let you know where we are with this, there is no vehicle classification for a self-driving shuttle or a self-driving vehicle at the moment. They haven't got one, right? And they're sort of saying, how are we going to get this MOT'd? How are we going to, what's an MOT look like on a self-driving vehicle, right? So we're at really early stages with those guys. So I think in terms of points on license, probably I think we'd end up being fined. Yeah, but it is the shuttle or the vehicle provider who's liable.
Okay, thank you. George, there's one more online.
Yes, from Ed Pascoe. Can it avoid potholes?
No, it will just drive over them if it thinks it's safe to do it, right? So I think it has got depth sensors on it. So if it thinks, you know, there's a big, I mean, massive light hole, then it will stop because it will detect that there's depth to it. But actually, you know, if there's just debris on the road, for example, it can distinguish between debris and a person, and it will keep driving in that scenario. And the same with potholes. If it's full of water, you might get a LiDAR bounce, and it might stop, but that's where the stereo camera comes in, and we do the fusion with the different sensors, so that we can avoid those, you know, stopping for the wrong reason. But no, it doesn't drive around a pothole, so it will just sort of keep going.
Thanks, Paul. One more from the audience, yes.
Daniel, something. I'm just wondering how the vehicle behave in a narrow single carriageway, and if an emergency vehicle behind, will you be able to dictate that it needs to park at the passing way, or it will just keep moving at the 12 miles per hour?
So at the moment, it will just keep moving, right? So I think, you know, in terms of can it handle sort of narrow carriageways? Yes, it can, and we can adapt like what the safety envelope is because we know it's going to be narrow, but it won't necessarily give way or pull over, right? So I think, again, that is a good point. And I think when we start testing it around Suffolk, we're hoping to do it at Felixstowe and at Adastrel and all around the Martlesham estate there. We're going to be in much narrower roads, right? So actually that will help us understand how to make it behave better on roads like that. So
Okay, I think we'll take one more from the atrium and then we'll call it a day. Yes.
Where do you see like this technology, if you had to predict it being in like 5 to 10 years time? Do you see these being a common sight around most of the UK, for instance?
I think in 5 to 10 years, yes. I think we could all be sitting in our cars, letting them drive us, and they'll all be talking to each other, and they'll all be talking to the traffic signals. You know, I think we'll see the pace really tick up because the government want that to happen, you know, and they are really getting behind it. And I think we'll see a lot of the US providers like the Waymos coming in when they unlock and take the regulations that mean you don't have to have someone on board. And then I think it will start to feel normal. I mean, they're quite commonplace in Milton Keynes now. People know about them, people talk about them, people see them, people saying, when can I get on one? You know, and it's like all these things, the more you see it, the more you feel comfortable with it. And you know, the technology's there. We need to unlock the regulation, get a viable insurance market. And then I think we could all be, you know, letting our cars drive, knowing that the car in front's broken, well, has put the brakes on 3 or 4 cars at front and we'll slow down and we won't even know what's happening because the car will take care of it. I think in 10 years, I think you can get there. Yeah.
Richard Evans has asked, do they run at night in the dark?
They do. They can do. They do. We don't run them in Milton Keynes Central at the moment at night in the dark, but because they've got all the sensors on, you know, again, you know, they will see better than we will probably see with our eyes in the night time. You know, there are other things that they've done around the world where they go through quite deep, long tunnels in places. They actually put radar on rather than LiDAR. So, you know, there are other technology solutions, but yeah, they do run in the dark. We've been on one, sort of at least dusk, you know, and they work. So
the other thing is the shuttle doesn't get blinded by the other driver coming from the other side, okay? So he just carries on. So whereas a normal driver might be sort of blinded.
Right.
Just another question. Phil Markle, yeah, you said before that the speed limit in this particular scenario is about 20 or something.
yeah.
If it rolls out further, you know, it might be 50 years time, I don't know if everybody in the country's using them, but if it ever happens, using it up and down motorways and things like that, when you can need to go a lot faster. Is that, do you see that happening any time, or any time frame for that to happen?
Yeah, so they run the shuttles faster than that around the rest of the world, right? So, and they're electric, you know, like any electric car, they've got oomph. It's about getting the right battery for the range and the speed. You know, we just choose in town and city centre environments. Actually, that is about the right speed because that's the speed that most of the traffic moves anyway. And actually, in many places, you'd be quite pleased to be doing 15 or 20 miles an hour, right? But I do take your point. I don't mean it that flippantly, but yeah, I think we personally, with these shuttles, see them as more of a town and city centre thing. I think, you know, there'll be other providers. There are people who do retrofit on traditional buses and put all the autonomous technology and bolt it all onto a traditional bus or a minibus. You know, they're probably going to run those on the faster routes. That's not where these shuttles are probably going. Although we could do it, there's nothing to stop us doing it. But we're focused on those sort of slower city town, just because that's where these shuttles seem to want to be adopted, right?
It's
Could I
not
just ask a supplementary to that? I think the point that Phil's getting at is, does the technology solution sort of allow them to go faster than 20 miles an hour?
Yeah, it's not a technology limit. It's not a technology limit. It's a decision operationally with like Milton Keynes or the local authority
Yeah.
as to how fast we and they want to run them. It's not technology limit at all.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the solution that's been adopted at the moment is to really cover that first mile, last mile sort of thing, to allow people to use the shuttle to get to a central hub from which they can take other forms of transport, etc., and really to get people out out of their cars. So the housing developments that Paul was talking about, one of the ideas of that is because with the shuttles, with running empty buses and everything, whereas before you'd have to have a scheduled service, but with the shuttle, if you wanted to, and we're looking at building apps that you can just request a service, in which case the shuttle come around, it'll follow the pre-designed route. It can't just simply come to your door, pick you up and take you somewhere. It's not a taxi service, but it can do that. So those sort of routes, and it's going to be fairly slow speed, because it's going to be either in areas where city centres or those sort of areas where you're not allowed to go at speeds, and some of the towns and schools and everything will now start to get 20-mile-per-hour zone. So if you go in London, you can only do 20 mile per hour. So it's suitable in there.
But just to add to that point, actually, so the LiDAR, we can see ahead like 100 metres, so we could be going at quite a pace. We can still detect things that are a long way off that we're going to get too fast if we're at high speed. So that's sort of an example of the technology is not the limiting factor. It is just a choice that we're making with the local authority, but that's the speed we want to run at.
And your insurance would be incredibly expensive. Somebody went 20 miles per hour, 6.
Yeah, and we're not going to do that. Obviously, we're not going to do that overnight. That's part of yeah.
Okay.
All those things have to move together, right? So good point. Yeah.
I think we better draw it to a close as far as the webinar is concerned, and this the main formalities, if you like. But I'm sure that Kurt and Paul will be around if you want to ask any more burning questions. They'll be around for a few minutes after. So I think what I'd like to do is just say thank you to Paul and Kurt for doing this, giving up your time for doing it, and perhaps you could join me in thanking them in the usual way. So just before you walk in, can you just put the other side up there? So we've got a couple of other events planned for you. We've already got the January event planned. This is where Dave Millen is going to come and talk about a little bit of history, really. I remember what advice notes are, but I guess a few people in the audience will not. But from there into intelligent automation. So that would be really interesting. He's a really good speaker. And I think you'll find that interesting. And some of you will know Dave from the past. We've then got a return visit from Clayton Nash, who is the strategy director of City Fibre, who's going to give us an update on how they're doing with their super connectivity and super giganet and gigabytes, to 8 million homes. And then we've got a historical thing in April from Professor Peter Grant. Where's he? A professor in Scotland, isn't he?
University of Edinburgh.
University of Edinburgh. So that will be webinar only, and it will tie into anybody who's been to Bordsey and understood how the magnetron affected chain home and a few things around there. He will be talking about the history of the cavity magnetron. And you can find out all about those if you go onto the website. There's a link there. I mentioned the CPD certificate before. You can get that if you're interested in CPD. This is worth a sort of hours on that. And I think that's it. So lastly, for me, thank you for all coming out close to Christmas. And can we, on behalf of the IET, wish you all a Merry Christmas and a successful and prosperous new year, I think. So this will be our last event this year. So thanks for all your attendance over the year, and we'll see you in the next year. Thank you.